Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group, the #1 group on contingent workforce services spend in the industry today. And I've got a really important topic that, we all think about, but it's often overlooked within programs. And I've got a great person to talk about this topic, and it's the topic of the value of capturing tailspend when operating contingent or services procurement based program. And I've got Alex Farr with me today from the UK over to talk about this through the beauty of Zoom and technology. And Alex, thank you for coming on the show today. It's amazing to have you, especially with your plethora of experience, with over 20 years of experience in services procurement and contingent workforce management, 19 of which was at Beeline as the VP of Partnerships and Director of Client Operations throughout EMEA. And then now you're at Spark RFX. So thank you for coming on the show today and talking about Tailspend and how to manage it better.
Yeah, no worries, Jeff. It's great. I've known you a while now, and it's always a pleasure to speak to you. It's certainly been a very interesting career over the last 20 plus years. And I've managed to cover quite a few different topics, technologies, ways of working. So, hopefully what we share today can be helpful to your viewers.
Oh, 100%. So, the topic of tailspend is often overlooked. It's often sometimes called rogue spend as well, and put into that evil light, of course. But it's something that, when you first start a program, you're trying to make impact and you go after your top 10, top 30, a certain maybe spend threshold, right? But then there's just hundreds and hundreds of vendors that have 2 consultants here, or short periods of time that you need work done, and it still adds up when you aggregate that together, adds up to a huge amount of money. But not only that, it also potentially is where the risk lies in your business, right? So thank you again for coming on the show and talking about the importance. And so, talking about this, what is the importance of the visibility of understanding where your tailspend is managing it better, and what are some of the impacts of not having visibility?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. I think you did summarize some very good points there. One thing just to mention, we all know how complex it is to implement a very very large enterprise level program, even mid-sized program, right? The number of suppliers that you can take on either as an internal management program or an external managed service provider is vast. Right? And you sort of almost got to focus on where the money is. So trying to capture every single piece of your supply chain, whether it's contingent or services based, it's not an easy task, and you can't implement for 12 plus months, right? You've got to call a line on it. And I think why it's important to me is that what I've seen over many years of working in the industry is when you get to that point of implementation, no one is a 100% on capturing that supply chain, right? If people have done it, congratulations, but I know it's a hard task to do. So what that does, right, at implementation stage, and why this is important, is that you may have captured 70, 80, maybe even 90% if you're lucky of your supply chain to go into your program. But then you've still got this 10% that's set outside. And we all know that once you go live into a program, actually trying to suddenly retrofit and work the process so that you continue to pull in that other spend that has been missed is one, what's the value, people say, what's the value of chasing sort of 10 to 20% versus looking after your 80% spend? And is the client really making much of a noise about it? So the likelihood is no, right? You tend not to get too much noise about it. But I think it's important because what I've seen over the years is that 10% or 20%, if it's not managed or brought into your program, it will continue to grow without you really knowing it. And you also don't know at specific points throughout that program, if a manager or someone who's bringing in a service is actually continuing to go to a separate supply chain because they're used to dealing with suppliers outside of the service. So I think it's important to make sure that people are aware that, yes, managing your tail spend is only a small percentage of what your overall program might be. But if you don't have visibility on it, you're going to come to, I suppose, 4 or 5 key risks, right? And you mentioned one of those. It's increased risk and compliance, right? If you don't have visibility on contracts, services, service service contracts with contingent providers as well, we all know the risk that can put you in. So that for me is the top issue that we see. I think the second one that I see is also a missed opportunity on supply consolidation, but also there's a reason why these suppliers might still be dealing direct with service managers or contingent managers.
They're
Might be that they're very, very
special,
good.
right? They're special, as everybody says, which some of them are legitimately special and they're sensitive situations, but often, there's a maturity of programs, is my take. And if you
Yep.
manage it properly, you can allow that to still have a good relationship with the managers, but not get in the way of the special relationship. And I always use air quotes because
Yeah.
if I for every 10 special, there's actually 3 that are actually special and need to be managed directly and couldn't have some sort of
Yeah.
relationship through the program, right?
Yeah, definitely. But the funny thing that I've always found is that they might actually be better than a lot of suppliers that you've got on your supply chain
Yeah.
that are actually in your program. So are we missing a trick there? Why? And also can that supplier see the value of actually coming in the program and maybe expanding the service that they're providing to that maybe 1, 2, 3 managers and expanding it to a wider range. Um, Time after time, it tends to come down to commercials, right? We're not wanting to come in and take a cut, but that's what it is. So I definitely feel the supply consolidation is a big piece of it. Um, and I suppose with the compliance risk is just the lack of visibility and control, right? Because if you've got a business that 80% of your program or less or more is going through quite a structured process that seems to be working, then there's a lower percentage that isn't. How do you govern that? How do you know actually what you're spending as an organization? And how can you identify any sort of strategic wins to try and improve that supply chain and bring more value to your clients? So I think that's a massive one, but not having visibility, is huge when it comes to, the compliance side of it. And of course, it's inefficient processes as well, Jeff, in my eyes, that process might work, right? The rogue spend, the tail spend, the process obviously works, right? Because it goes ahead and it happens. Um, but if you've not got visibility of that process and how it's operating, because you might actually learn something from those people that are managing those processes direct with the supply chain that could add value to your program as well. So again, I think, it also could be on the basis that the programs that you've implemented, the processes you've implemented, sorry, maybe there's something in that process that isn't working for the whole of the hiring community as well. So I think there's quite a lot in that piece, and of course, right, the very last one, which some people might put at the top, but I think by not having all those things, you are missing potential cost savings, potential strategic decisions that can help the business that you're working with, or the business you're managing. So I'd probably say those are my top 5.
I think when it comes to things like compliance,
Mhm.
you really shouldn't be circumventing the rules when it comes to compliance issues and why those policies are in. So even in the, let's call it the, non-managed or the tail spend that happens in the non-managed areas, there has to be some sort of way to bring that in to a program, at least for the compliance side of things, right?
Oh,
Because you're
completely
putting the
agree.
organization at risk
Yeah.
by not managing the compliance, at least, right?
Yeah. Can't agree with you more. It's, I suppose it's, you have to try and find the right balance, be about keeping your workforce, your service organization, service supply chain happy. Um, let's call it rogue spend on the contingent side, and maybe services tail spend on the more services side. When I look at the the rogue or the maverick spend that you see off contract, a lot of the spend that I've seen in time is because they're very specialized roles, right? And maybe the managed service provider doesn't have the supply chain to support them. They are niche suppliers, but that doesn't get them out of making sure that they're a reputable supplier who actually work for that business, and the people they're providing have the adequate compliance to deal with the situation. When I look at some of the technologies out there, service-based technologies, but also the freelance technologies, a lot of those freelance technologies are very niche, right? They provide a specific skill set. They don't go to the broad brush type, every single type of role. So why not have a slightly different process to help manage some of those hard to fill areas versus having them completely out of management? What's better, right? Having a slightly different process to bring them in, or saying no, we're going to do this across every worker. So then it actually means that you've got more risk with compliance and actually knowing who you're working with. So I do 100% agree with you on that side. And it's no different on the services Tailspend side as well, right? The majority of, I had a very good podcast myself with a guy, Gary, recently. And, he works a lot in the public and private sector. And 100% of the reason why businesses, go or create Tailspend or manage Tailspend in certain ways because of compliance. So it's same on both sides, but I suppose the reasoning's a little bit different. The procurement side, you tend to look at the fact that, you don't have a procurement team that can suddenly span every single supplier if you've got 200 plus suppliers. So you have to focus on that high volume. Very similar to how a managed service provider would provide. But there still needs to be a process in place to capture that lower percentage.
Yeah, and I think it's a balance on both sides. I find, some of the freelance platforms are amazing at what they do, and the talent that they source from all over the globe with specialized skill sets. But they also have to understand that they're not disrupting the world. They're providing resources, right?
Yeah.
And that generally there is a process in place for resourcing. They are not reinventing anything. They're finding a resource, bringing in a resource, and then billing for that resource, right? So so there's a balance there that the vendor themselves and the platforms start to actually, if they want to get in with the broader sector and not just be billed on a pay card or a credit card for a few heads here or there, you got to go through the front door. And with going in the front door, there will be more, hey, there's an ecosystem, there's already existing technology. You're not going to replace the ERP systems, right? You're not going to replace the VMS systems, which I often call the ERP of Contingent and services procurement often. But how do you work within that ecosystem? And so I think the platforms that are bringing specialized resources, if they understand that and work within the existing ecosystem that has been there for 20 years, and work within the employment laws that have been there for hundreds of years, right? That's the other thing, is you're not going to disrupt employment laws. They were there for a reason, right? Although it's interesting how in California they can lobby and put out billboards and people vote to change the laws, but that's a whole other thing. But that's coming back around the other way. So, I think there's a balance, and not only setting up a program to be more inclusive, right? And have some flexibility where there's some niche things happening so that it's at least managed within a program. Versus, like you say, just totally outside and unmanaged. And then that's where risk lies, extra costs, and just lots of inefficiencies. So some of the hows and the methods you've seen over time, and I'm assuming, there's technology at play, but there's also, how do MSPs or program teams that are managing a program internally start to put methods and the how in place to help managers utilize the vendors they need within that tail spend, but have it within the program.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few. The fact is that the methods that have been in play for the last couple of decades, they do work, but I think it's very much down to the people and the relationships. So I think first and foremost, I think it's evident that managed service programs or internal HR teams who are managing programs, the relationships, the amount of podcasts and documents and things I've seen in the last 6 to 12 months, it's really down to a lot of the stakeholder relationships between procurement, HR, and a managed service provider. I think,
Yeah.
there's still work that can be done on that. And I think managed service providers, the model that managed service providers, when you're looking at a services and a contingent program, still operate in a very contingent mindset. And I know there are some out there that don't. So this isn't a broad brush comment, but
Yeah.
the majority do, right? It's not just about that. So I think that, one thing is that MSPs need to maybe take act of what brokers are doing in the procurement space to manage their supply chain, and think a little bit about how could they be a little bit different from the administrative process that they follow to manage services to actually adding value. Because one, that will start to give the buyer side more confidence that these service providers or this internal team know what they're doing, right? Services tend to obviously be managed by category managers anyway, on if it's managed internally, right? So there's that element. But if you've got a team of category managers that are focused on that top level of services and goods, but they don't have the time with that lower end, they need to feel confident that the people and the service providers coming in have the knowledge, understanding, and also the ability to make sure that they're nurturing those buyers, but also the sellers in that relationship. So that for me is probably one of the most key things. The second is data and visibility, right? It's making sure when you've got those right relationships that you have access to the data that is outside of the existing program or services. And if you don't have that, then it's very difficult to understand where Tailspend is. So very, very basic point. Everyone should know this, but it's a case of actually taking action and doing it. So build the relationships with the finance team, procurement teams, and really understand how can we help get visibility of it? Because it might be that some finance teams maybe don't have the right systems or structures in place to best capture it. So one of the things that I've been focusing on in my current role is actually about how can technology help that process, right? From a point to say that maybe have a chat with finance to just auto reject those invoices that come through and ask the supplier to log on to this portal or that portal and register their details and start that administrative process. So I think there are ways, but again, it's down to really how you are managing that relationship with that client. So those to me are probably the top two things. And then I think once you start to get that visibility, once you start to get that stream of additional suppliers in place, you then need to take a step back and then obviously start to analyze. Well, it's difficult to say, Jeff, right? Because that 20 or 30% spend could be via 100 suppliers across tiny little things. So maybe the decision there is, well, it's too complex and too much of an administrative burden for us to take in. So let's utilize technology to manage that. Let's utilize technology to create a purchase order number, and let's just make sure we're tracking it so we've all got better visibility. Because in 6 months' time, maybe those 100 suppliers might start to, do things slightly differently and actually start bringing in more services. So getting that visibility. But for me, it's, if you don't know what it is, you might have 20, 30 suppliers doing the same thing. No different to when you implement a program on the contingent side. 20, 30 suppliers all offering at different rates. There's no consolidation of process. There's no understanding of what that supply chain is doing. So I think you need to take a strategic view on what you're looking at and make sure you've got the people who know what they're talking about. Because if you've got a program team that's managing the program whilst then trying to analyze and understand what opportunities there are, I don't believe that's the right way. So it's about also the internal team and the managed service providers being structured with the right people, the right knowledge, the right resources, so that when you've got all that information from the technology, you can start to implement process. And maybe that is from that supply chain. Yeah, you leave it as is, but maybe you just take them to a request for quote or a request for information before a service is agreed. Maybe don't put robust approval processes in front of it. Let it happen as it is, but just put that one rail guard in front and just take it slowly. Because I generally think the reason why we are still sometimes struggling with these areas is we just try to enforce far too much process. And we all know, I won't use the analogy of my son again, but if I ask him to do something 5 or 6 different steps to get somewhere, he will find some other way to get to that end result, and probably quicker. And he might even find more value by doing it that way. But because I'm like, no, I'm your father, I must tell you this is the way you do it,
Yeah.
it doesn't help. So
Yeah, the idea of trying to control it with, especially, and you nailed it. If you don't understand it, don't try to control it up front, right?
exactly.
Have that more inclusive um, perspective and approach to say, hey, listen, we don't understand the spend, so why don't you come through the program? We won't get in front of it. We'll just let it happen, but we just want to start to understand it better and understand the relationship and the services that you're providing. And you also mentioned something very interesting, and I've thought over the years, the most important people in a contingent and a services procurement program are often what I've deemed the catchers, right? Or the catchers of information. So they're the ones that will help you identify this tail end of spend. And
Yep.
that's accounts payable, right? And information security. So information security is when they try to get access to a system or
Yep.
a facility. And that's often, the deal's been done, but then now it's going to provisioning. Have them understand the value of what you're doing and then identify new potential tail end vendors and providers that weren't in your program here, but that are coming in over here so that you can at least have
Yeah,
some
yeah, definitely.
visibility.
Yeah.
And then on the back end, guess what ends up happening when a vendor's invoice doesn't get paid?
Yeah, yeah,
It will
exactly.
escalate and the vendor will identify themselves because they want to get paid, right? And
Yeah.
so those two people are very important in the realm of managing a program to at
Definitely.
least identify where the tail
Yeah,
spend.
yeah. Even if you're providing a true service, whether you're providing I don't know, a change management transformation project, or you're actually providing technical widgets to a company that you're getting delivered, right? If there's better governance on how that's coming in, and it's difficult because I had said earlier, right? You need to be good to your supply chain. You need to engage them to make sure that they want to come in part of the program. But there is also some point where you have to put a stop in, right? But we're not saying we're never going to pay your invoice. We're not saying those people can't come in and complete their work. We're just saying work with us. Help us understand what you're doing. We don't want to be at risk, as a business, whatever it could be that comes up. And maybe we can work together to work on a strategic relationship. Yeah, not everyone is going to adopt to it, but just let's not just try to be the masters of governance, and let's try to balance the governance, but show the value to both the buyer and the seller. Being that middle person in the middle, let's show the value to both of them by saying why you should engage them, and just express to them that you're not here to completely change process. There probably will be a mandate from above, right, to say you've got to do it, but you've just got to be very smart and clever about how you do it. Otherwise, you will alienate the buyer, you will alienate the seller, and they will never come to you. They might give you, a nice smile on the phone or whatever, whenever you meet them, but actually behind it, they're still working outside of the system, and maybe, as we said, missing out on cost savings, creating compliance issues, not having control and visibility. It's extremely important to get on top of it.
Yeah. And then over time, by starting to have it in your program, understand it, you can manage it better, right?
Yeah, exactly
Down
that.
the road. So I know there were some methods there. One of the things I'd seen in the past is utilizing your EOR as
Mhm.
EOR AOR service or the payrolling company as the aggregator of your tail end spend, right?
Mhm.
And so, how I often looked at it was it's just a tax to do business underneath a layer there, but at least it allowed you to gain some visibility. And then as a strategic partner to the MSP or to the program team, the employer of record and the agent of record billing entity at least has very strong knowledge of your procedures, policies, compliance issues, etc., so that they can kind of be your extension of your program in vetting out some of this, not
Yeah,
in deep detail, but at least watching for, very offside issues, right? Either cost issues that just don't make sense or compliance issues, right? So some of those, like high impact issues, be it cost and or compliance issues, that third party who's working with your MSP or your program team can often be some of your eyes and ears on that long tail spend on the
Yeah,
small.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. It doesn't work for all though, right? Because one of the reasons why some of that supply chain might not be engaging, is from a commercial perspective, right? And if you might have a number of resources that have been there a long time, that moving them over to EOR, AOR model absolutely works, right? But then in some niche areas where the supplier wants to continue controlling and the manager still wants that control, it might not work. So I think again, it goes down to having the flexibility of different options and having the knowledge, the market knowledge when you're speaking to your client about what options are available and what might work best for your supply chain. But EOR, bringing in a payroll provider, 100% is a very, very viable option for clients.
Yeah. And so, the other, and as we, move forward with AI and more modern technology and robust technology, we're starting to see more and more technology providers starting to come into this space and offer really neat solutions, right? And so where are you seeing some trends, and are you seeing some interesting solutions out there that are addressing this issue as well?
Yeah, technology solutions, procurement technology, contingent technology. It's been out there. There are solutions that can do it. I think it's a lot around how those solutions are implemented and how they're governed. I don't want to self-promote my business too much, but the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is I see a great opportunity to continue to help businesses not remove tail spend. I don't want to say that the technologies remove tail spend. All you're doing is better governing and managing that tail spend and then helping to take it forward. I think the key is that businesses continue to have to keep their own internal headcount pretty tight. No different from managed service providers. We haven't all got money to throw around to throw 15 people on a program or a procurement category. Those teams are still going to stay continually lean. So it's the emergence of technology is really starting to shape the fact that those procurement teams no longer need to expand their numbers. It's no longer looking at my supply chain of 200-300 suppliers. There's no way we can look after those. It's like no, we can look after our strategic suppliers. We can look after our lower spend, below threshold suppliers, but we can actually manage them all now in one platform. And the amount of technologies that are out there to offer clients support with ESG, with onboarding, with reporting, with analytics. There's so many different platforms out there, but for me, there is still a gap in how technologies can actually help make sure they're better capturing it and managing their supply chain. Hence why I'm moved into the business that I've moved into, because I think there's an opportunity there. And then on the other side of it, the freelance technologies and the EOR technologies and the compliance technologies, they're also continuing to evolve and offer solutions that enable a program to not just put everything through a VMS. I'm not saying that you shouldn't put everything through one technology, but there are technologies there that specialize in certain areas. So why not better utilize them? And I would just like to see the managed service market, technologies to an element, just work better on integrating and having the client and the supplier in mind first. So I know we've all got revenue to look after and all those wonderful things about growing and keeping a business stable, but actually partnering more and integrating more will continue to help evolve programs further, and open doors for providers in other clients. So I see it as a win-win. Maybe some programs, day one might not see a win-win, but I believe it's in the greater good of making sure that we offer good services to our clients, our buyers and our sellers.
Yeah, building the ecosystem. So there's a lot of best breed point solutions that are coming into the market. It's how they all work together and to provide excellent service to the client. And quite honestly, it's generally not incumbent on the organization to figure out how you integrate, even though that's some cases the motivation for companies to come together. But it should be the providers coming together, be it with the MSPs, the VMS solutions, the platforms coming together to say, how do we all work together in a very seamless workflow to satisfy the client's needs, right? If you're
Yeah.
always just relying on the client to do it, it becomes overwhelming, quite honestly. And I think luckily we have a very interesting ecosystem within our space of a lot of individuals and companies that have worked together over the years and are figuring out how to make those integrations happen. The ones on the outside coming in trying to disrupt our industry is kind of the ones we should say, hey guys, come on in, come on, let's figure this out, right?
Definitely, definitely. It needs to embrace, the reason why new technologies, such as Spark RFX are being created. It's not, we're not here to completely, obviously, winning new clients and helping clients is obviously top of the agenda, but also it's about just improving the quality that an end buyer can get and a seller can get. And if it means that, I sit and I spend time, which I have been doing, with several freelance softwares and going, hey guys, I believe there's a solution here that we can offer to more mid-sized clients. Yeah, could you potentially get more business on your own? Could I get more business on my own? But no, let's work together to provide a better solution. And I don't want it to sound really, cheesy or whatever, but I just believe that's the best way to work.
There's no question.
Otherwise, what ends up happening and what I hate, and the reason I was, obviously before I joined here, as you know, I ran my own business, EW Scope, running software consulting. The reason I did that is I was sick to death of businesses being given solutions that don't fit their need because the solution provider needed to make a sale, right? And I'm a strong believer that regardless of whatever business you're in, please don't push a solution over to a client that doesn't meet their needs just because you are going to make revenue, because it will bite your company in the back in years to come down. And yes, great. So yeah, if a client comes to me and wants to do something and it doesn't actually meet the technology specification, I'll probably suggest that they go somewhere else to find something that meets them best.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm providing the service. It's like Jeff. It's like within your business offering a VMS service within independently. You're not going to do it, are you?
No.
You simply don't do it.
Exactly. And that's where I think
give the client bad service.
The different expertise, right? Be it the solution being a technology-driven services procurement and contingent workforce tailspend management solution, or a services management solution. If you're going to have to offer compliance in that, but why make a mediocre compliance solution? Why not plug in best of breed and vice versa, right? As a compliance solution, we hear from the client that they need services procurement. Why not say, hey, we know best of breed provider and we'll work together to offer the solution? I think building that ecosystem of between the providers to offer a full stack is really important, right? So it's very interesting that we're kind of leading to that part of the conversation, right? So I unfortunately we're getting to the end of our episode here, but Alex, it's always amazing chatting with you, and I think we could talk more and more and more as always. I always end things off, if I'm handed services procurement or handed this, oh my goodness, it seems like our tail spend is growing, and how do I wrangle this in? What should I be thinking about on the short term and then longer term? I know we've talked a lot of this, but how do we wrap it up with where do I start, right? Because often if you think about too many of the moving parts, you get overwhelmed and you don't start. And so as a program lead, talking on this topic and handed that initiative, what should I be thinking?
Well, the first thing is, which many managed service programs or internal teams have made the mistake of before, is get the right skill set, right? Because, as a leader of a contingent program, flipping over and then starting to manage, rogue spend and tail spend on the services side, don't think it's an easy job to do. It's not. And one, a lot of your relations at that business are going to be covered over the service that you've got. So my advice is stop thinking about the solution day one. In fact, don't even have a solution in your mind. Go away, make sure that you've got the internal knowledge within your organization and the right people to give you the understanding of how to manage these aspects, especially services. spend more time with your internal or clients procurement services team. The category managers are a wealth of knowledge. There's a reason why they don't cover specific suppliers. So don't just think you can go in there and solve a problem that they've been trying to deal with for 20 years. Seriously, take some time and understand how you can help deal with it, because there might be inherent problems that they've not been able to solve for a specific reason you can learn. So in all honesty, Jeff, I think that is what I would do. Don't think coming in, I'm going to go to solve your problems. There's always a reason why something is in a certain way. And so focus on that analysis. Then, make sure that when you're providing a solution that you're socializing it well, you're getting the right buy-in from stakeholders. You're making sure that you integrate your ideas with a procurement category team. Don't, seriously, you want to provide value to your clients, so speak to them. All right. And that's, I suppose, the main advice I can give. Solution comes after analysis. Don't do solution before analysis.
I 100% agree. And actually, it's funny because often that happens. You build things in a black box thinking you've built everything perfectly. And then what is the analogy? Square peg you've just built doesn't fit into the circular hole, right? And it would have been much easier to talk to your client base and understand what's going on prior
And I think
to.
my final word, I know we've got to finish, right? But if there's one thing I've learned over the last year, and some of the absolutely amazing category managers that I've worked with and had, sessions with, is that procurement are not scary people, right? Yes, they're there to help govern process, but they're actually there to give you value to the business, right? And they want the best for that business, and they want to evolve that business. So, take away any preconceptions people may have had about procurement in 20 years. It's a lot different now, and there are a lot of good people changing the way procurement is operating. So, yeah, give your procurement person a high five rather than a cold shoulder is all I can
For
say.
sure. And I think you nailed it. Both are trying to do the right things. And so by coming together and creating a collaborative and inclusive environment, you'll be able to figure out the solutions to make it all work, right? And a phased approach. You don't have to big bang it right away and manage everything, right? So, Alex, amazing conversation. And I really, really thank you for taking the time. I know it's probably tail end of the day for you over there in the UK, but
I like the pun. I like the pun on the topic.
Awesome. So thanks again. Amazing.
Cheers, Jeff. Nice to catch up with you. See you soon.